Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you beauties for another installment of Preseason 2025 Power Rankings. Pretty much got the entire LCK rosters filled out. They started late. They were the last kind of major region to start making moves, and it feels like they were the first to wrap things up. There's still one or two players maybe on DRX to be finalized who's going to be the actual starters, but I don't think switching the starters for DRX is probably going to change where they are on this list.
We're sitting at a pretty healthy 98, maybe 97.5% completed rosters in the LCK, and more than completed at the top end, which is the important one to look and examine and really have that conversation about. So yes, time to do the way too early, but actually not way too early given the LCK starts in January power rankings.
Yeah, we're almost just over a month away from things kicking off over in the LCK. We begin at that kind of bottom of the table, the three squads. You can talk about DRX, Nongshim, Fearx. I think you could shuffle these maybe in order amongst them, but these are the pretty clear consensus bottom three teams heading into the year. And maybe saddest part of this one, how about poor La Hens? Going from Gen.G domination, getting the full demotion down to Nongshim.
Yeah, that one hurts quite a bit, and especially when you see the rest of your teammates on Gen.G get rewarded with a little bit of extra cash in their pockets. Not necessarily the same feeling for someone like Lahens does get a reasonable contract, I'll say at the very least. Maybe not the best opportunity with Nongshim. You're also looking at a couple other guys returning to the LCK when you're talking about this bottom type of territory. We've got your boy UCal making his return to the LCK after all this time. Rich returning to the LCK, making an appearance there, and Vikla making an appearance once again in the LCK. This is maybe talking about this bottom three teams. This is the redemption group, a team, players, teams, all looking to recapture or rewrite their history in the LCK.
And all three of those guys you mentioned, at one point or another, you were talking about them as an all-pro level player in their respective regions. Remember the whole thing with Vikla, when he was in the LCS. Yukal's been around for a long time. Rich has been one of the most polarizing guys, both in the LPL and the LCS. He's either an absolute top-tier top laner, or you're wondering why he's in the league.
And the only problem that I'm going to bring up big time with that one is maybe you're gambling on hitting on the, the successful tenure of Rich and the type of times that he can put in with that. When you're looking at what is the schedule for next year and how much games are to play, I don't know if you can truly say, yep, we're going to get more good than we're going to get bad from this situation with Rich. But that's the type of territory you're in when you're talking about this bottom three area of the LCK and what type of hopes, what type of risks and gambles you're having to take to try and get a payoff.
To me, this list starts to get interesting at that 7th spot when you're talking about KT, Rolster, and I know the infamous one game away from eliminating T1 and being that 4th seed from the LCK to represent at the World Championship. Guys returning, Perfect and BDD coming back from last year. Going to be the sophomore year for Perfect to continue to develop. Cuz is coming back. He's obviously got history with both KT as an organization and playing alongside BDD, but it's obviously the bot lane. If they keep Hype, to play alongside Way, if they both get promoted from the challenger scene, I'm feeling a whole lot better about this squad because Dom over the last couple of years, that ain't.
No, and especially it's, the very difficult task of stepping into the shoes that Deft has just left at the ADC position here for KT Rolster. Not that he was essentially lighting the world on fire and showing us the true Deft form type of thing last year, but it still is an intimidating role to step into for this KT Rolster team. Dom necessarily isn't the equal. He isn't the upgrade in any of these situations, so that certainly is something against this KT Rolster team that needed a boost, needed that extra push in this offseason to show you that they are now going to be one of those players in that top tier of the LCK. They're not going to be pushed aside, relegated into that final gauntlet match type of situation. I can't see anything higher than that type of situation this year for this team, even if you're getting the best out of BDD and Cuz, because I am a believer that Cuz returning to this lineup with BDD alongside him, you can hope and you can push for that very best that we have seen from the two of them and the synergy that they can have together. And that will take KT pretty far, but you need a little bit extra to get over the hump, to be in that contention with some of the top teams that we will talk about. And right now, that bottom lane is not giving me enough confidence to say they will be there.
And that's even if Wade lives up to the hype that he has as that young rookie coming in here. But, you know, you look at Cuz versus Piosik, and honestly, last year Piosik was pretty damn good on KT and had to put his big boy carry pants on. I think the ceiling you get out of Piosik is higher than Cuz, but Cuz is kind of the more steady jungler to have. So we'll see what form he's in now with a mix of veteran and young talent on this KT Rolster lineup. We'll see how he fills in to that void. But we know him and BDD have gone back and have a whole lot of history together. 6, obviously the format's different. We're used to saying top 6 is your playoff bubble. Things are obviously going to be very different in this format, but this has got to be the highest that we have had. OK Savings Bank, Brayon, your Kespa Cup champions for 2024. Obviously, we've seen what we expect the 5 starters to be in that Kespa Cup. I know Bull is in there as well as that sub-80 carry, but you feel like if Hype continues to play well, he's going to be the guy that they're going with. But I think bringing in Closer here is maybe the biggest move in the offseason for them.
Yes, and I'm so happy you hit on it because, yes, there's so many wonderful things to talk about and be excited, be hopeful for with this bro team. But the thing, the anchor that holds it all together and really reassures you is Closer in the mid lane and the role that he has taken for this team. And we have seen so far in the Kespa Cup. Yes, a very short, a small value type of tournament to take anything from. But it's the only thing you got to take anything from heading into this next year type of situation. And what we saw there is the bros asserting themselves into the picture of what is gonna be that competitive zone of the LCK. You see it with this roster. You see it with what Closer is able to do as that leading charge in the mid lane for this team. And then we can talk about Hype, the guy you're missing from KT Rolster, because yes, you're missing him with the damage that he was able to put out for the bros through this Kespa Cup run.
And obviously, expectations going into the year for a squad like Bro. We're talking back-to-back 10th place finishes, 8th place finishes in 2023. It's been a long time. I don't even know if they've ever even made playoffs. Like, I feel like they were hovering around the 6th spot a while ago, but this is a team that's been perennially at the bottom. But now this is a nice little mix of the rookies and Hype coming in, rookie jungler coming in. Palu kind of was just getting started as that starting support last year, so continued growth out of him. And then, of course, the Lord himself, Morgan. Pretty much him and Palu, the only guys returning from last year. And then, as we just talked about, Closer as now. It's crazy to talk about guys like Closer and Morgan as the veteran presence on a squad, but that's exactly what they are.
Time stops for nobody, my man. It keeps going, and that is where we're at, where these type of guys have moved on from the fresh faces of the LCK into more of a veteran role now with this OK Savings Bank Brayon team. And Morgan in that top side is going to be the interesting angle for me because, again, we know that he has contributed, been able to punch above his weight for what this OK Savings Bank Brayon team has been. We've also seen mistakes, right? That has also certainly been there. And the question is going to be, now that everything else has risen up for this team, that there's going to be a higher level, that you're going to be in a lot more winning and more competitive positions, are you going to be a liability or are you going to be the thing that pushes your team over the top? That's where I'm identifying in on a veteran player like Morgan needs to take that next step for this team.
The perennial gatekeepers of the playoff bubble in the LCK is, of course, the Kwangdong Freecs, who we got sitting in that 5 spot, just ahead of the Bros, and obviously a lot of changes coming into this roster this year. Bulldog and Dudu, the two returning players, and I mean, the solo laners were absolutely the standout for Kwangdong. We're still seeing a slow growth for Bulldog of getting towards that top half of LCK mid laners. Piosik doing that swap for Cuz, as we already kind of mentioned, talking about the ceiling that he had with KT. And then, of course, the most exciting one is that bot lane Berserker being paired alongside Life, being back in Korea, having that home cooking. People aren't going to be late to scrims. He can speak in his native language. I'm excited to see Berserker prove himself in this more competitive LCK market.
Believe it, boys, you're about to see Berserker Prime here for Kwangdong Freecs. I'm ready. Buckle up. It's going to be one hell of a trip on the Kwangdong Freecs train. You talked about the returning members already for this team, and yes, I think both of them need to take another step for this team in order to maintain into this playoff type of territory in the LCK. And if the goal is to push even higher, to start to disrupt that established top order of the LCK, yes, you're going to need them to contribute, and the new guys. Talking about Berserker down in the bottom lane alongside Life, I think this is going to be one of the bottom lanes that's going to surprise people in the LCK. I think both of them, Berserker, of course, with the LCS pedigree, not getting as much recognition as I think what his skill set deserves, and Life, kind of some, some down years in the LPL, not necessarily getting the success that I think a lot of people thought he would have following up from Gen.G. That is where we're now stepping into with the Kwangdong Freecs.
And there was that hype era with Milky Way on FPX where Life was cooking up support Rumble and was one of the more exciting bot lanes to watch. So we'll see if he can get back to that type of level with Berserker. But let's be honest, this is just our annual hype up the Kwangdong Freecs. Are they ready to take that next step to vie for maybe a top 4 spot in the LCK?
And the X factor here for me, Piosik in the jungle. We know what type of guy he can be, what type of glue he can be emotionally for a team. A young squad like this in the Kwangdong Freecs, I think he will find his friends. He will find that type of energy, and I think he will be the linchpin for this team. And I'm looking at him to continue his climb in the LCK. A very, a surprising one at the start of last year. Some of the results with KT Rolster, with how good he was able to do, and then kind of cooled off a little bit, but still a steady contributor for that team in the LCK. I'm looking for more this year from him for this Kwangdong Freecs team.
Still not ready, though, to put them in that upper echelon. The Godfathers, the top 4 of the LCK. At the bottom is still your Dplus Kia, and obviously just got to the finals in the Mickey Mouse Kespa Cup tournament, but things to look for them. Obviously, the growth and development of the young top lane in CU, the rookie, and Lucid in his sophomore year. Can Barrel shore up a lot of the macro mid to late game decision making for the squad? And can they play a comp that's not just feed gold into aiming and hope he doesn't get caught out?
I feel like this is the position in the LCK Ocean where you found all of a sudden just this little mysterious cave that has a random air bubble that you can just take a little breath, a little breather in before you keep going down into the depths. And the Leviathans that wait there as the big teams of the LCK. You got Dplus Kia, this little air bubble, this little pocket to safety right here, because they're still, they're close to these Leviathans. They're getting towards that territory of scariness. But you still got to worry about the other descenders, the other guys in the LCK, Kwangdong Freecs, KT Rolster, the Bros, those type of teams looking to make that type of jump. DK could be vulnerable. And again, what we saw at the Kespa Cup did look a little bit vulnerable. We're still waiting on the time for them. I think the big one for me is going to be, again, in that top side. How quickly can you adjust to the LCK, the difference that is going to be there as far as the competitive skill level, the strategy, all these type of things. That's going to be the big one for me, because again, once he gets going and feels comfortable, I've got faith in this Dplus Kia roster shaking the tree of the LCK. But until that point, I think they're going to be vulnerable to some of these teams behind them.
And it's a very tough tree to shake when you're talking about top 3 in the LCK. Very familiar foes, and I know people are going to say, wait a sec, T1? In the 3 spot, you're talking about the back-to-back defending world champions in at 3. And yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. Number 1, this is the world's buff gone. This is the LCK debuff that T1 has had over the last couple of years. And obviously, number 2 is the great Doran Zeus exchange. Yes, people are overreacting about what Doran is going to do for T1, but it's still no question a void will be left behind that Zeus had.
I really like that you acknowledge that we are not in the World Championship zone. There is no Worlds buff being applied to T1. It is the LCK regular season debuff applied to them that we have seen over the last...
Maybe it changes with the new format. They say LCK Cup? The Summoners Cup? Okay, here we go.
Could be a different angle, but it is going to be, what is it, five times now in a row that we have not seen the T1 lift the Summoners Cup for the LCK
2022
trophy.
spring last time.
Been a long time since we have seen that one. Doran steps into the shoes left by Zeus. Yes, it's impossible to replace exactly what Zeus could offer and did bring to the Rift for T1. That doesn't mean that Doran is a slouch by any type of means and what he can offer. And I think there's so much about it because, again, you have some people that are just too strong on the believer scale saying that he is going to be the Doran that was smacking down Zeus all the time, proving to be his father out there on the Rift. That's not exactly what you're always going to get in that situation. But at the same time, you're not getting all of these mistakes, all of these uh-ohs, ouchies, whoopsies that you are seeing in the low light reels that people try to put out there and say that that is him as the player. T1 is returning. That is where I think more of the focus needs to be when you're talking about this roster with Faker, Owner, Guma, and Kyria down in that bottom lane, the key parts that are staying with this team, and how focused and motivated they will be to prove someone like Zeus wrong for leaving the dynasty, for moving on, trying something different. This is a T1 team that, yes, again, behind these two other Titans that we'll talk about in the LCK, but they are at the very least in that territory. They're in those depths where you have the scariest, most dangerous creatures waiting of the LCK.
And I think that is a bit of extra motivation that this team might have not had after back-to-back Worlds, but now proving that they can be a top team without one of the members of Exodia being on the squad. So it's going to be a proving year for them and a proving team for Zeus. It's always a proving year for Gen.G, and now with Ruler coming back to replace Pays, I think most people still say that's an upgrade, even how fantastic Pays was. But the reason Gen.G's not up to that top spot, we'll get to the other team in a minute. But of course, also Duro coming in for Lahans, you know, an unproven commodity on the big LCK stage, and we know that Lahans is a very vocal player and contributed to the shot calling, so that's obviously the one little teensy question mark for this Gen.G squad.
It's going to take some extreme advanced algebra to figure out exactly what the equation looks like and what you're gaining with Ruler over Pays and what you're losing with Duro instead of Lahens in this type of situation. It's nothing set in stone. It never is one of these type of equations, but you do need to figure it out. And at the end of the day, whatever that number equals, that number is going to be enough that the pressure turns to Chovy and says, if you can't get it done with this type of difference being added to the team that was already at this type of level, you're not the guy. You ain't the Faker. You ain't the unkillable Demon King replacement type of situation. So I think there's a ton of pressure on Gen.G in this situation, right or wrong, whatever. There's that pressure that they got to succeed. And adding the additional benefit of Ruler, for sure, that's a bump. That's an increase in the lethality and what can be contributed on this team. But make no mistake, the pressure, the stakes are even higher for this Gen.G team than they've ever been.
Which is crazy after winning 4 LCK titles in a row before being dethroned, winning an MSI title. But, I mean, the reality is the core of Chovy, Canyon, and Keen returning, it doesn't matter what your bot lane is at that point. Those three guys are good enough to be a top 3 team, basically.
It's crazy that I can talk all that about the bottom lane. I can talk all about this pressure on Chovy. And that's not even hitting that you've got Canyon just sitting there on the roster waiting, and how fantastic he was last year. A real rebound year for him. And I think one that rewrites a lot of the previous years from how people evaluated him with where things were going with Dplus Kia. That has changed. Keen in the top side. I think a lot of people are going to maybe kind of lose track of exactly how good and how important he was for this Gen.G team last year with all the conversation about Zeus and then the Doran swap type of thing. I think Keen is going to get a little bit lost in that shuffle. He'll quickly remind people in the top side with his performance that he should never be forgotten about.
Yeah, and of course he was kind of linked to some of that drama too. So stuff to prove for him as well on this Gen.G roster. But they lost to Hanwha in finals last year, which is a big reason why we got them in that top spot. They lose a tough, one of the best series of worlds to BLG at that World Championship. And of course, Zeus coming in as, if that's the only roster change you're making on a year is getting Zeus on the squad, you're probably getting an A+ for your off season.
An already rising team in the LCK adds in the most substantial addition you could make this off season. No surprise, Hanwha Life sits atop the LCK, too early power rankings. Very happy to see this one come through. I think mixed feelings about the whole Zeus situation, you know, T1 sweater and everything going on here. But I think at the end of the day, this one does shake up the LCK in a very interesting and exciting way, adding this extremely accomplished Zeus to this hungry Hanwha Life roster that has had a little morsel, a little appetizer of what it's like to be the champions, to be at the very top of the region. They want more. They are on a path to not only capture that, but they want to prove that, yes, Gen.G, your domination was pretty cool. What about adding world championships to that type of level, to be this other team, not T1, that is leading the charge and holding the flag of the LCK? I think Hanwha Life, with Zeus added to this roster, Zeka performing, Viper popping off, Peanuts, Mastermind, Jungle Mind, I think that this is absolutely the #1 team in the LCK.
Yeah, and listen, there were rumors, inklings, is this Peanuts' last Worlds that we're going to see? Maybe he was about to have a chat with upper management, and they said, we signed Zeus, by the way. And Peanut, okay, I could do another year, I guess. But if you're the makers for these teasers for the LCK, Ruler coming back, and Zeus versus T1, you're frothing at the mouth.
It doesn't stop, my man. And you can go all the way down to how hungry the bros are to finally get some respect in the LCK. Berserker coming over from Cloud9, everything else. This has got to be one of the most thrilling and exciting possible years ahead of us in the LCK. You slap down all the format scheduling changes and events that we're going to have. Unlike anything we have ever seen before. Buckle up, folks. LCK 2025. It's going to be here sooner than you think.
Yeah, some of the best and deepest storylines that we've had before a game has even been played in 2025. But that is it today for those power rankings. Eric and Mark here with you. Beautiful people, thanks for hanging out as always. And you best believe we will catch you on that flippity flip.